Thank you, Peter. This was Peter's first time to lead the meditation anywhere ever. What do you think? Blessings. Thank you. Your board is going to be rotating through to lead the meditations, and it's a spiritual growth work for anybody, that wants to write it, because when you write it out, it's amazing, isn't it? You have an experience that's different. And also, I was praying for Peter this week, knowing it was his first week, and so a lot of his meditation notes are in my sermon notes. We have the same, we captured the same idea, and you'll hear it in a minute. If you were hearing the meditation. Sometimes the meditation starts and you just go off, right? Because you never really hear what I always say to the board members, don't worry about what you say because we don't hear it, right? We go into that inner experience and the voice that speaks in us is the voice of Spirit, and we hear what we need to hear. So thank you, Peter. A husband and wife were talking, and the wife said, I can't believe it. I didn't get to the gym today. And she said, that's 7 years in a row now. And he said, well, maybe we could go out for a jog later today. The weather is sunny and beautiful. And she goes, I love how you pronounce, why don't we go out for ice cream? So there you go. Well, that's romantic relationships. We are continuing in our month-long series, Spiritual Wisdom for Healing, and I want to look at 4 or maybe more of the healing miracles of Jesus and how they demonstrate divine life, how they demonstrate his understanding and his understanding of divine life and his operation of spiritual law. And so that it will enrich our lives with greater wholeness and healing. So as Peter said in his meditation, and I'm saying my notes here, when you have a bruise on your arm, you watch it change colors, right? And it gets purple and then yellow or green or whatever, and then it heals. And when you have the flu, you may wait for your fever to break as a sign that healing has arrived and it's here. And when you have a paper cut, isn't that pesky little pain of a paper cut? You watch as the skin grows back together and the pain diminishes and finally your finger is smooth again. And if you have a bug bite, the red swelling and the itching, you may put some ointment on it, but it eventually goes away. And as you heal from those things, you wait patiently, sometimes impatiently, but you wait and you watch, and you may take some flu medicine or some aspirin or some NyQuil or put some ointment on the bed, on the bite or a Band-Aid on it or something, but there is no doubt in your mind that you will get well, right? You don't spend any time fretting over how you'll get well, when you'll get well, what treatment you should do. You know you will get well. There's an understanding consciousness of wisdom and omniscience that you'll get well. And we believe that bug bites and paper cuts can be healed, but sometimes when we get the bigger illnesses, when they show up, the more complicated ones, the ones that hang around for a longer period of time, we may think we don't have sufficient faith to heal those. We're not sure we can get well. We're not sure what is this that's happening in my body. And in fact, our primary response to a difficult illness can be fear and not faith. Or at least an initial, whoa, right? What's happening? A trepidation of some kind. So this morning I want to remind us that the life force that flows in your body that heals the paper cut is the same life force that heals a cancer. Same life force operates the same way. It is the nature of divine life to heal, and it's always at work. Always at work. It is the nature of divine life to heal. Now, Eric Butterworth gave us a beautiful illustration of that in his book, Discover the Power Within You, and it's helped me understand this life force idea. He says, if you tie a rubber band tightly, you're smiling because you know this one. If you tie a rubber band tightly around the tip of your finger will turn red, right? And if you leave it on there longer, your finger will turn purple. And if you leave it on there even longer, your finger is in danger of serious harm, isn't it? But the moment you release the rubber band, what happens? The life force flows in immediately to restore your finger to its original pattern of perfection. The omniscience, the omnipotence, everything that is in the life force, it knows how to heal. Its nature is to heal. That's all it knows how to do, is to restore and to heal. Doesn't it? Doesn't it? So true healing doesn't depend on anything outside of you. It depends on allowing the nature of divine life to do its work in you. It's the nature of the life force to heal. Let's put our hands on our hearts and say that this morning. It is the nature of the life force to heal. You must understand that. And it doesn't matter what you're working at healing and returning to wholeness. There are many things that we want to heal. We want to heal physical things, sometimes cancer, diabetes, heart disease, depression. We want to heal habits, right? Procrastination, overindulgence, eating habits, sleeping habits, golf swings. Pray for my golf swing. We want to heal personality quirks, right? Jealousy and anger and those kinds of things in us. And if we have a condition that's termed chronic, rather than thinking in terms of total healing, we oftentimes think and pray to be able to live with it or to be able to manage it, right? We take prescription for migraine and Move Free for stiff joints, and we put on reader glasses, and rather than pray for total and complete health and wholeness, we begin to say, well, I'll learn to live with it. I'll learn to manage it. But that's not what the divine has in mind for us. And then you add to that, when you have something in your body, you add to that the very convincing MRIs and the x-rays and the medical diagnosis and the pain and the tests that confirm things, and then the collective consciousness that we're just getting older and that's the way things are, and oy vey. I mean, I can hardly even say all of that because it's so confining and so constricting. We may get that we can use prayer and right thinking to better our condition, but I'm not sure all of us live with the full faith that we can use prayer and right thinking to be totally healed, every condition, no matter what. That we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual law. And it's easy to fall into the thinking when there's something happening physically in you that your body is man-made rather than God-made, and that you're subject to physical laws rather than the higher power of spiritual law. But this morning we want to remember and remind ourselves that we are spiritual beings and that true healing, your healing, does not depend on time, the nature of the illness, the severity of the illness, the treatment, how long you've had it, where you got it, how it started. It's not limited to any pattern that runs true to that illness or any statistic of who can heal from that illness. True healing is of God, and its sources in divine life. One of the 12 faculties that Phil teaches us so marvelously, and I've seen him behind closed doors when he's had a health challenge, and he goes right to work prayerfully to reaffirm that life and that health and that wholeness. So, true healing doesn't depend on time. That's the title of our lesson today. It begins the instant that you return your awareness to oneness with the perfection of divine life in which you were created. And isn't it interesting? I always like to think about when Jesus healed, he healed right there in the moment, right? There was no take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. You know, there wasn't, he rarely asked, we said last week in this healing series, it's important to know he rarely asked, what are your symptoms? Where did it hurt? How did you get this? What was your family history? What was your childhood like? Were you abandoned at birth? Have you had traumatic things happen to you? He didn't do that. When he healed, the kind of illness and the severity didn't matter. It didn't matter how long a person had been sick. He healed those who had become suddenly sick. He healed those who had been crippled for years. He healed those who were blind from birth. Distance didn't matter. When the father came and said, "My son is sick, please come," he says, "Go thy way, your son lives." We saw last week with the centurion's servant that he healed with the spoken word and said, "Go on, your servant is going to be well." Distance didn't matter in that he healed the woman who kneeled at his feet. He used various methods of healing, the power of the spoken word. He called forth in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." He commanded the healing life force, "Stretch forth your hand, take up that bed and walk, go down to the river and wash your whatever," right? And he did physical stuff where he picked up dirt and he spit on it and he made a clay and he put it in the blind man's eyes. So he used what was at hand, anything that he could use to activate the omnipresence of the life force. And its omniscience, it knows how to heal you. And its omnipotence, it's all powerful to heal you. But we have to put ourselves in alignment with it. When Jesus healed, he demonstrated over and over there is a spiritual principle of life, health, wholeness. It is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. And he emphasized that our part in healing is belief in it and receptivity to it, to divine life. We said last week that Jesus only used one word when he talked about illness. And it wasn't the cause of illness, but the thing that would interfere with healing. And that was, do you remember it? It's your pop quiz. Unbelief. Unbelief. He didn't say unbelief causes illness, but that it interferes with your healing. And if you can give your belief instead of your unbelief to some condition, then you open the way for your healing to come. All things are possible to the one who believes. We sang that in our words today. Only believe, only believe. All things are possible, only believe. So we see a pretty good demonstration of a lesson in belief with the woman who touched the hem of Jesus' garment, because she had spent everything to get well, all her energy, all her money, all her time, but she never stopped believing that there was a healing possible for her. The story is found in the Gospel of Mark, and I want to remind us of the story. By the way, when you graduate from ministerial school, you get a Bible. And oftentimes they solicit sponsors to give the students Bibles. And my Bible is presented to Cherie Larkin by Philip and Dorothy Pearson. Yay! And it's engraved in the front. So, remember how Dorothy used to do this and she'd read to us? I know, 30 years of watching her. So, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched the hem of his garment. For she said that if I but touch his clothes, I will be made well. And immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. When you get still and you touch that divine life, you know that it's been imparted into your body and is moving through it. Immediately, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched me?" And the disciples said, "Hundreds of people are pressing against you, and you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he said, "I perceive that power has gone from me." And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Your belief has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. So again, he's demonstrating belief in the life force is all-powerful. Metaphysically, we see Jesus is the Christ, of course, and he's representing the expression of divine life. And anytime there's a woman in Scripture, she is our feeling or our emotional nature. And this is the woman this is the part of our feeling nature that has any degree of belief in healing, any possibility and belief in healing. And it's interesting that the crowd of people, my licensed teacher, Wanda, in Nashville, always said the crowd are your thought people. They're your thought people. They're the crowd of thoughts that swarm around you. And in this instance, they're the crowd of thoughts that are blocking her healing, that are interfering with her healing. She'd heard of the power of Jesus to work miracles, and she set out to meet him, but this was no small gesture because spiritually, she had to push her way through all of her thoughts of fear and doubt and worry and what if I never get well? What if this doesn't work? Her illness was considered shameful, and that if anybody got around her, they were it carried legal defilement for anyone who came in contact with her. So she was subject to ridicule and being shunned in public. So she had to push her way through shame. Ever have shame or embarrassment about an illness? I did. I'll tell you about it in a minute. Unworthiness. She had to keep pushing through until she got near enough to grasp one of the tassels on the edge of the robe of his garment. And when she did, she was immediately healed. Just the edge of the Christ consciousness, just the edge. Healing comes when we make contact with the universal Christ consciousness expressing as divine life. And we only have to grasp the edge. We only have to turn toward God like the prodigal did, and God runs to meet us. We only have to touch the edge of that consciousness, and we are fully filled with it, with the healing life. And isn't it great to know that we don't have to grasp the entire understanding of how healing works? We don't have to know how God heals. We don't have to know how divine life operates. We don't have to know what Jesus would do, WWJD, or any of that. We don't have to do something to deserve healing, and we don't have to have 10,000% faith in order to get well. We somehow think when there's a bigger illness, we need more faith, to get well. And we don't have to do any of that. We only have to make a sincere effort to touch the edge of the consciousness of the Christ. And then full healing is possible. Now, we may have to push through our own crowd of unbelief. And that's where the work in consciousness takes place. We may have to push through our own worry and our doubt and our fear and our what-ifs that's separating us, blocking us from the universal healing life. But as soon as we touch it, we're flooded. Just like the finger. When you take the rubber band off the finger, you're flooded with the life force. Our healing does not depend on time, treatment, severity, statistics, but on contact with the Christ. But oh, we are so conditioned to look everywhere else. Busted. A few years ago, I had this rash that broke out on my skin. Started a little welt right here, about the size of a quarter, filled with red and filled with liquid and extreme itch. And then it was on my nose, and then it went up my arm, and it moved around to various parts of my body. It was on the back of my leg. Every day kind of showed up somewhere different. Enormous itch, it just insatiable itch. And it lasted for about 4 months. And I spent probably $2,500, my part, on doctors and remedies and all of that. 7 doctors, practitioners, primary care physicians, specialists, dermatologists, whatever that big fancy term is for above dermatologist that looks at your skin. There's some word for it. holistic doctors, biopsies, remedies that were naturopathic, cleanses, ointments, creams, healing oils, drugs, prescription, over-the-counter, and then thinking I might be ingesting something, we had all the water in the house checked. Here's a tip for you. If you have a water filter, we took the water filter out because it filters out the chlorine, but the chlorine eats the bacteria in the lines. So every once in a while you need to take your filter out until you can taste the chlorine in the water again, because it will destroy the bacteria that's built up in the lines. Okay, check, did that. No help. So then I had a jacuzzi jetted tub, and I had the tub taken out because they said, well, behind the jets there's mold, and when the water circulates it could get in the drinking water. That must be it. Take the tub out. I did. $2,500. 4 months later, spent it all, frustrated, itching like crazy, and I was still no better. Like the woman in the story, I was very caught up in the trauma and the drama, and I tried every external remedy that I could find to get some relief. And I wasn't any better. I wasn't any better. In fact, I seemed to be getting worse. The little welts were showing up in more places. And it wasn't until, rather than as a first effort, but as a last resort, which is how we sometimes go to prayer, right? If all else fails, let's just go deep into prayer. It wasn't until I got serious. I was praying, but I wasn't really sitting down and letting go of the drama, to get still. So I sat down and I got still, and I asked to be led to complete healing. And it was then that my answer came. And I didn't spend hours in prayer, but it was just a very focused, humble request for help. Help me, God. Help, show me how to meet this. I am divine life, created in the image and likeness of your purity. And your life and your purity streams through my body. And whatever is blocking this purity in life, reveal that which needs to be revealed and heal that which needs to be healed. And when you pray for divine life to be activated in you, the omniscience of that life knows how to heal you. And sometimes it's something outside of you that needs to change. Sometimes it's something in your thinking that needs to change, something in your feeling in your heart that needs to change. But the omniscience of divine life knows. And it will reveal to you what needs to be changed in you or lifted up in you to receive your healing. And my answer came in the most interesting way. And it's kind of like the woman. It was an embarrassing thing. I was sitting on the couch watching television, and my boyfriend was sitting there, and all of a sudden, he started scratching the inside of his arm. And these welts came up. And we looked at each other, and we went, in that moment of, well, it's not something just in me, it's something outside of me. And he was very astute, and he said, come with me. And we walked into the bedroom, and he lifted up the dust ruffle, and there, on my side of the bed, was the most fabulous spa resort hotel for bedbugs that I had ever seen. And they had been munching on me. The buffet line was open every night. And they finally opened up a branch location on his side of the bed, and it was bed bugs. No biopsy showed it, nothing. But I can tell you, in the moment when we discovered what was sourcing the illness, and that there was a remedy, and that divine life had shown me what it was, I had that same enormous, monumental relief and connection that the woman must have felt when she touched the hem of the garment. When you know and you know that you know you've touched your healing. And it doesn't mean that the healing happens in consciousness. You ask about divine life, and that's where you receive your answer, and then you open to how the answer comes. If you've ever had to get rid of bed bugs, oh my gosh, I had only ever heard about them at the hotels in New York City. And I think that Ashley, my niece from New York City, was coming back and forth with her suitcase, and somehow, who knows where they came from, but that was another $1,300 to get rid of, have the house fumigated and But I'm happy to say My house and my skin were restored to their normal pattern of perfection. And we went forward from there. Once I calmed down from the trauma and the drama, and I opened to the omniscience and the omnipotence and the omnipresence of the Christ to direct me to my healing, healing came. Healing came. It's the energy of full engagement with the Christ that heals, not anything else. Well, there's a saying in unity, go first to God and then to man as God directs. But it's the energy of full engagement. Every time we look past appearances and look to God, you activate that life force within you. I love it in the book of Acts. There's a scene where Peter and John are walking into the temple, and there's a man who's been carried there every day, who's lame, crippled, and he's carried there every day to beg for money. And as Peter and John walk by, Peter represents faith, John represents love, and as they walk by, the man asks them for money. And Peter stops, and it says he stops with John standing close beside him. And he says to the man, "Look on us. Look on us." And the man looked up, expecting to receive money. And Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ, walk." And he took him by the hand, it says, and immediately that his feet and ankles were strengthened, and he jumped up and went into the temple praising. But I love that word, look on us. Look on faith. Look on divine life. Look on divine love. Look on us. The disciples knew the power of full engagement with the Christ. They'd experienced it for themselves. Look on us. Look on us. Wherever you are in your life, and the need for healing, look on us. Look to divine life. The power to be fully engaged is within you. You can push through the crowd of limited, fearful, anxious thoughts. You can push through the crowd of thinking that some power, some condition is greater than the power of God within you. That's not true. You are created in the very substance of divine life. And that pattern of perfection originated you, and it's contained in every part of you, and it works in you constantly. It is the animating, sustaining life force of your being. And it is without beginning and without end. It is pure and perfect and free. It is powerful. It is ceaseless. It is changeless, and it's eternal. It's been with you from the beginning of time, before you were even in this incarnation, and it will be your source of life forever. So this morning, if ever you feel that some condition is too serious or too long-standing to be healed, this morning I want us to remind ourselves that our healing does not depend on time, nor severity, nor treatment, nor statistics, but on connection, deep connection to the Christ. So let's affirm healing for your life this morning. Put your hands on your heart and say, God's divine life is at work in me. Together, God's divine life is at work in me. I am healed and whole now. I am healed and whole now. And so it is, in the name and the nature of divine life, you are healed and whole. And so it is. Amen. God bless you.